Okay, let's go ahead and get started there, everybody. And of course, the the browser isn't showing it properly. Hold on one second. Let me fix that real quick. There we go. Now there we go. Okay, that's fixed. Okay, so hey there, everybody. I see that we got some chatters already. Cameron, Mercy, HQ, thanks for stopping on by and catching me. well, I'm late to the game as it is anyway. I normally try to start up, around 1 o'clock, but hey, we're here, right? Okay, so today the plan is Blackheart, who is currently in my stage right now, waiting for me to actually get off my ass and actually get started on this. We finished off working on the working with audio section. Okay, we covered pretty much everything um, concerning sound. So we're going to pretty much ignore the sound cue reference for the most part because it's just basically talking about all the properties and stuff like that. So it's like, okay, we'll probably be dealing with that during the course of our development anyway, so we're not going to worry too much about that. So the next topic that I said that we could probably work on is artificial intelligence. But here's the thing. Um, they have artificial intelligence under this making interactive experiences. So, while talking about this yesterday, we came to an agreement that both of us would be moving on into making interactive experiences in its entirety because there's a lot of topics here that we need to cover. So let me go ahead and get Blackheart into the stage here so that he can start speaking. And let me hold on. And let me go ahead and unmute you so everybody can hear you as well there, Blackheart. And I'm doing okay. Sorry again for the late arrival, but
Don't worry about it.
better late than never, right?
Yeah.
So, um, so yeah, the main idea right now is going through the making interactive experiences because there's a lot of topics here that we're probably going to be needing to use when making
Yeah.
even the clone of the game. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, Now, obviously, some of them we probably won't touch. You know,
Not
um,
yet.
at least not yet, or it might be a long time before we even discuss some of these topics, right? Such
Yeah.
as vehicles. Having someone getting out in and out of a vehicle and controlling said vehicle. That's probably something that we're probably not going to be worrying too much about on our first couple of games.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah.
you know. So, um, but there's obviously a lot of other topics here that are still, um, you know, topics that we still need to kind of go over. Physics being a major one.
Yeah.
Input being another. Saving and loading your game, that's going to be another one. Cameras, definitely. So there's a lot of elements here that we're going to need to kind of um, look through with and work on. So now, I wanted to kind of cover artificial intelligence because one, it's a fairly hefty um, topic for the most part, um, but it's also not exactly the easiest one either. Well, I mean, it can be really simple or it could be really, really difficult. Okay.
Yeah.
It all depends.
Depending on the behavior we seek on the NPCs.
Right. Well, I mean, it depends on how much you want to, how smart you want your artificial intelligence to be. Okay. And, you know, uh, for the most part, the the artificial intelligences that you see in game is typically just handling something that was just already like pre-programmed in by the programmer saying, okay, if you see this, you do this. And that's it. That's you see this happen, make this reaction. And that's it. Okay? It's really, as one of my professors once said, that's not really artificial intelligence. Um, that's more state, you know, um, a state, function kind of thing, where you're basically saying, okay, you know, you get cause A, you do step one, step two, step three, and there you go, right?
Yeah.
So, but it's really really a hefty topic. So hey there, Cameron, how you doing? Um, so it's you know, I doubt that they're going to be covering everything that there is to know about artificial intelligence in their documentation because believe me, eh, you know, um, depending on how tough you want to go, or how intelligent you want your artificial intelligence to be, you're increasing the overall scope of it. So, you know, so yeah. Guess what I did last night? I have no idea there, Cameron. So, um, um, played a game, played Genshin. I don't know. Okay. So let's go ahead and get started on the first topic here, which is just making interactive experiences. Now, the index here is just basically going through all of their various topics here. So, I mean, I'm not gonna worry about like clicking on every single last one of these. Although I think I'm seeing some topics here that they are not listing in the section to the left-hand side.
More
Interesting.
like those are the container of the different topics. Like on the index, you have like probably the overview of things. Then further down, you have another subtitle, which is gameplay framework, which have its own set of topics of its own. Networking has its own set of topics. Physics further down below also has its own set of topics.
Yeah.
So the first part might be sort of like an overview, and all the other ones shown are like the more in-depth information.
Well, they're showing the subtopics kind of contained within them. I just wonder if they are indeed, like these look like they're showing all the individual pages in the subtopics, but I wonder, like, are they maybe skipping a couple subtopics or anything along those lines? So, um, caught an exposed predator. Oof, that's rough. You know, Mm, yeah. I'll maybe talk about that a little, in next hour or so. But yeah, that's rough. Good for you to catching that person then. Okay. But let's see. I'm kind of curious as to whether or not you know, Are they showing any of the, like, are they skipping anything in particular at all on this, or, you know, maybe not. Maybe they are. Well, I mean, obviously the networking, for example, networking overview. So, I'm just wondering if there's like some like subtopic that they might be skipping out on, kind of thing. Because I've seen that before where they're like, here's a whole lot of topics and stuff like that, and then, like, the left-hand side isn't necessarily showing you everything either, and it's like, you know, this might be really, you know, helpful if we had that, but they're not really showing it on the left-hand side. But, I don't know. They're not really going in the order that they set things up, though. That's so that's a little rough, but um, let's see. And they're not showing all the topics either from the looks of it. So um, slow cloning tool, chaos physics. Okay. I just want to kind of go through this real quick. See if there's anything here um, that they're not really showing or anything along those lines. You know, See if there's anything. Um, hmm, Setting up. Okay, so now it might be the fact that one of the, like right here under the how-to guides, they're talking about setting up character movement. I would imagine that that's something about like maybe input, but maybe not. So it's like, there does appear to be some like slight topics down at the very bottom that aren't necessarily following what they have on the left-hand side. So that might be something that we might want to consider coming back to at some point there, Blackheart. I don't know if you would agree with that or not. So, um,
Um, I guess we're gonna have to cover all of this
yeah,
either way.
right. Okay. Um, okay. Um, well, let's go ahead and get started on at least the very first topic here, the gameplay framework, shall we?
Yeah.
Okay. So, or actually, did I guess the section for the making interactive experience is just basically saying, that, this is basic stuff. This section covers information, blah blah blah. Not really anything majorly useful or anything along those lines. We could just go ahead and like skip that and move on. Um, okay. So gameplay framework. Um, okay, looks like they don't really say much in this particular section. They kind of move on into the gameplay framework, other topics later. So that'll be interesting. Um, okay, so core systems such as game rules, player input and controls, cameras, and user interfaces. To show how the different pieces of game framework interlocked, here's a simple example. Imagine a simple concept for a game where a rabbit races a snail. The base of the game framework is the game mode. The game mode sets the rules of the game, like the rule that whichever player crosses the finish line first is the winner. It also handles spawning the players. Um, okay. Um, hmm. That the I'm a little curious about that. Because sure um, that might be great for like a really simple like puzzle game, but how does the game mode work in terms of like something like an RPG? You know, um, is the game mode covering like all the rules of the RPG all at once? Because that would make the game mode really vast. It really explode game mode out a lot if it's trying to cover all the rules for the entire RPG, right? You know,
Maybe.
so I'm kind of curious about that.
If they
Um,
handle it for a different method, not instead of game mode.
um, unless there's some way of like maybe divvying out like different subsections of it, and but it's still kind of covered under the game mode. Then I guess that could still work. It's just um, we'll have to see, you know, where it goes from there. But a player is set up with a player controller, which can possess a pawn. The pawn is a physical representation of a player in the game, while a controller possesses the pawn and can set rules for its behavior. In our example, there should be two pawns, one for the snail and one for the rabbit. The rabbit would actually be a character, a special subclass of pawn that has built-in movement functionality, including running and jumping. The snail, on the other hand, has different style of movement, so it can extend directly from the pawn class. Um, I mean, so the extend directly from the pawn class. I mean that applies to both the rabbit and the snail in this particular case. So if they're both considered pawns, so um, now, well, here's where it's a little odd. Um, they're saying pawn is the physical representation of a player in the game. They didn't state it outright that it's a you know pawn is a you know represents like NPCs. So the fact that they're saying that the pawn is can either be a snail or the rabbit or both is interesting. Normally, for a simple game, you'd have one pawn, player controlled, being like the snail or the rabbit, and the other one being controlled by an NPC, which wouldn't technically be a pawn in this case. So
Depends if you can switch between either of them before like starting a run. In which case you would need both of them to have the pawn functions.
or but you would need both of them to be able to have the pawn attributes, but not necessarily be you know um, like if it's a single player game, you can't say both of them are pawns because then one of them wouldn't really even run because it wouldn't necessarily be controlled by the player at that point. Unless, of course, you're trying to say that both the rabbit and the snail are being controlled by the player at the same time. It's like, wait, what?
That can be
That's,
done.
I mean, it can be done. Why, though, would be questionable. Why would you be controlling a race between um, you know, two runners that you're trying to compete against each other? There's no challenge there. There's no. It's like, oh, I'm gonna let the rabbit win. Okay, are you doing anything with the snail or something like that? And it's a little weird, and it can be done, but still might be a little weird. Normally you'd want to have like one of them being controlled by an NPC AI, not technically a pawn. So you'd want the that kind of character being able to be swapped out from, AI to pawn back to AI, at will pretty much, right? So
Right.
so but, you know, sure. Okay. A pawn can control and contain its own rules for movement and other game logic, but that functionality can also be included in a controller. A controller can either be a player controller, taking input from a human player, or an AI controller with automated control by the computer. In this example, the player would be controlling the snail, so the snail pawn would be possessed by a player controller. The rabbit would be controlled by AI with rules for it when to stop, sprint, or nap, all being set up in an AI controller which possesses the rabbit character. Only human players care about the view provided by a camera, so only one camera component in the snail pawn would be used by the player camera. So, so I like how they um, basically explain that kind of process of how to handle who we control what, how it would be controlled, the camera, the AI, so on and so forth. So, um, and obviously the rules, like if you were to switch over from the snail over to the rabbit, the player controls would have to be um, changed differently, or the AI would have to have some form of like maybe boost or something like that to try to make it a challenge for the player. So, the fact that they were like saying, "Hey, the rabbit has to nap," it's like, okay, interesting. A little bit of tortoise in the hare scenario there. So if you're the player, and they're basically saying, hey, you have to stop at certain locations to nap, then obviously that would be, um, what would happen if you were to not nap? You'd basically crash and therefore have to sleep for longer. So, you know, so obviously there's going to be like, different rules depending on, um, which one you pick, right? So, during gameplay, input from the player would move the snail around the map while the HUD was overlaid on the view provided by the camera, showing information about who was currently in first place and the race time that has had elapsed. Well, if you're a snail, oh my god, I would feel sorry for your race. um, It'd be like, okay, it's been 10 minutes so far in game, and I've made 1 inch, or like 1 millimeter. Oof. How far? Where's the finish line? Oh, just 1 kilometer away. Ooh. It's like, okay, maybe we might need to change up the rules here a little bit. All right. For quick descriptions of the basic framework elements in a chart and how they fit together, check out Gameplay Framework Quick Reference. Otherwise, you can use the links below to jump directly to pages overviews of each class and information about how they can be set up in blueprints or with C++. So, all right, moving on. Um, okay, we can probably get through this one in the next 30 minutes fairly easily. So, gameplay framework, quick reference. Short overview of classes for game rules, characters, controllers, user interfaces, etc. that make up the framework for the game. Excuse me.
You okay?
Yeah, I'm just burping. Soda, So, the basic gameplay classes include functionality for representing players, allies, and enemies, as well as for controlling these avatars with player input or AI logic. There is also classes for creating heads-up displays and cameras for players. Finally, gameplay classes such as game mode, game state, and player state set the rules for the game and track how the game and the players are progressing. These classes all create types of actors, which can either be placed into your level or spawned when needed. Um, hmm. I'm kind of curious what they mean by actors here. Um, hmm. Okay, let's move on here a little bit. Okay, so one of the problems that, I often find is people take um the people, some people try to take like one concept such as an AI character, right? Or an AI NPC or something like that. And they keep on putting like certain different labels on it. Like actors, um, agents, pawns, characters. It's like, maybe.
Can you give us a hint of what they're actually referring to?
What's that? Well, I
If
mean,
you could at least give us a brief description of what they're actually referring to with each one.
it'd be nice if they kind of stuck with like one specific word for that particular, you know, um, stuck with just one specific word. Okay. Um, for example, they say here, representing players, friends, and foes in the world. So a pawn is an actor that can be an agent, quote unquote, within the world. And it's like, okay, well, is an agent the same as actor? They don't really know. They're not saying anything along those lines, right? So that's why it's like, you know, so far you've introduced like three different words that in a sense mean very similar things, but at the same time, if you're not careful, they that could get, that can run away from you, you know. So that's why I'm like, okay, um, you know, again here, a character is a humanoid style pawn. It's like pawn is supposed to be for player based, uh, is supposed to be player based. So you're basically saying that the player now has the ability to have a character, but they're also a pawn, but they're also an agent. There's also an act. It's like, guys, do yourself a favor. Keep with just like a specific term, and that's it. You're adding too many terms here that mean the exact same thing. So that's all. That's you know. Um, So here's what I'd say. Okay, one, an AI And whenever I talk about AI or artificial intelligence, controlling NPCs, you know, in or at least back in the day, they were always referred to as agents, or at least unless they've changed that recently, they've always referred to as something being controlled by an artificial intelligence as an agent. Okay, so a pawn, which is supposed to be apparently something controlled by the player, wouldn't be an agent, okay? Because that would be something controlled by artificial intelligence, okay? Um, Character, okay. I don't know why they're switching, changing these changing this up at all. An agent can control an NPC character. Um, I guess your pawn could be controlling a character, so I don't know. It's really weird on this one. Just saying. Well, let's read through and see what the heck they're talking about here. So a pawn
Hello,
is.
Julian.
Oh, okay.
There's
Uh,
someone in chat.
no
Invite.
worries. Yeah. A pawn is an actor that can be an agent within the world. Pawns can be possessed by a controller. They are set up to easily accept input and can do various and sundry other player-like things. Note that a pawn is not assumed to be humanoid. Right. Okay. Um. I mean, sure. You can definitely consider. If you're saying that the pawn is player based, then it could be just something like as simple as, hey, you're controlling a jet flying in combat or something like that. So your jet is the pawn in this particular case. So sure, okay. Character. A character is a humanoid style pawn. It comes with a capsule component for collision and a character movement component by default. It can do basic human-like movement. It can replicate movement smoothly across the network, and it has some animation-related functionality. So they, okay. Um, so they're basically saying that um, you being the pawn, if you want to have a a human character, someone that has human features or humanoid like movement, humanoid, you have to put the pawn into a character component to control said humanoid. And it's like, guys, it's like, oh, what are you doing on this one? um, so they specifically made, according from what I'm reading here, they've made it so Unreal Engine has I guess you might say like a function or class that is very specifically handling a humanoid style character, even though you might not need it, in your game. It feels like they're making the assumption, which is, I mean, I get why you'd want to make, certain assumptions like that, where it's like, hey, you want to allow for people to kind of do what they need to do, giving them a lot of pre-built functionality, so you don't have to like reinvent the wheel yourself. But at the same time, you might not need a humanoid style pawn. So I would hope that, character wouldn't necessarily be something that is like they're trying to like force into your game engine, or into your specific game. You understand what I mean on that?
Ends. Ends. Be careful, you dumb cat. Did you forget the fan was there when you jumped again? Oh, and you shook the whole bed with that. God damn this cat. Sorry about that.
That's okay. That's okay. Um, but you understand my concern about that, or about what I was saying, or do you want me to repeat what I was saying?
Hmm. Yes, I kinda do. Like, from what I'm getting from this, like, while pawn can be used in humanoid, uh, it's probably mainly reserved for non-human playable things like animals or things like that.
Yeah, that they state that
While the character is already has some presets for human-like characters.
right.
Not you don't necessarily wouldn't need the pawn for character.
Well, no. Um you would still need the pawn, because the character is a humanoid style pawn. So, now, do they talk? Are they talking about like, um, like, okay,
Yeah, another thing is saying that the pawn can be possessed uh by the controller or the NPC, if I remember correctly. But a character, what I wouldn't probably mittens, not again. Look at now. Now you made the fan squeaky. Stop rubbing your face on it.
apparently your cat's very warm as well and loves the wind blowing in his face.
Yeah.
um, the okay, so from what I'm reading here, because a pawn is something controlled by the player, they're basically saying that a character is something that a player will control that is humanoid. So, um, now, um, what I'm wondering about right at this moment in time is, um, if you need a character for your game, some form of humanoid, player controlled character, um, you know, do you need a pawn? Because characters are supposed to be already humanoid style pawns. You know, would you still need the pawn class in that particular case?
I feel
Or
like you
is
would need a pawn class
or is
if you had like multiple characters you can switch between and you need the AI to control the others. Well, if you only have one singular character to control, then you would just use character, in my opinion.
one would figure that now character might be an extension of pawn. Okay, maybe it's built off of pawn, in terms of coding style. Um, yeah, I would imagine that would be the case. And then of course it adds in various human-like movement to that character. It'd have like pre-built like functions and capabilities that would allow for human-like movement, built into character already. You know, Otherwise, what's the point of actually having character there within the engine, right? It's like
Right.
um, you're basically saying, hey, um, you know, we're gonna give you this character that is able to do all this human-like movement and not give you any functionality whatsoever. It's like, here's this humanoid character, but we're not going to tell you, we're not going to give you any kind of code whatsoever that will allow this character to even walk. It's like, wait, what? you know. So that's where I'm like, Um, but here's the thing. Um, I'm hoping that when you create like a brand new like you're trying to build a game from scratch. Like you don't want anything added into it like right away, right? You just want something that is a pawn, something that will be controlled by the player, and that's it. You don't want it. You're just like creating a jet fighter game, right? Just here's the jet fighter, flying along, destroying everything that it's in its path, right? You wouldn't necessarily need human-like movement in that particular case. You wouldn't need characters. So I would hope, again, I'm not sure. We'll find out later. I'm assuming that it the Unreal Engine won't automatically add character into the game for you, right?
Right.
I would hope that wouldn't be the case. I would hope that the engine will go, oh, you're making a new game? Okay, well, we'll add character in for you. It's like, I don't want character. Why are you adding this in when I don't need it? That kind of thing, right?
Mm,
I would hope that's the case, but I don't know. And I'm not sure. We'll find out about that later, I guess.
I
But,
guess.
but we'll see, I guess. Okay, controlling pawns with player input or AI logic? Or is there anything else that you wanted to talk about this, or
Mm,
anything that
not right.
comes to your mind about, what we've just covered?
Not right now.
Okay. Just wanted to, if there's something, obviously, just say, hey, Jim, no, hold on. Let me talk about this. Um, okay. Um, controlling pawns with player input or AI logic. Controller. Controller is an actor that is responsible for directing the pawn. Mm, okay. Pawn is not something that is apparently um, player controlled. They've already um, they've already kind of stepped away from that.
Yeah.
um, so that's unfortunate. They've already kind of stepped back away from that, which is unfortunate wording on their part, but because you know, um, you wouldn't necessarily need to worry about something directing the player in a sense. So um, they typically come in two flavors: AI controller and player controller, and that's why it's like, well, AI controller controlling a pawn that's supposed to be player based. Okay, well. um, a controller can possess a pawn to take control of it. player controller. A player controller is an interface between the pawn and the human player controlling it. The player controller essentially represents the human player's will. The AI controller is what it sounds like. A simulated will that can control a pawn. So so in a sense, um, when we're making the game, we're we're basically going to be saying, okay, we have our player character's pawn, out there in the world, say like a fighter jet, right? And you know, we need to have a controller managing it that will have basically the player controller, which basically extends controller. So, um, and of course, all the enemy fighters that we're going to be flying up against will all be controlled. All the agents are going to be controlled by an AI controller for each and every single last one of them. Or they're going to be like on um, a railed system, which really has no AI to it. So, like, the ships will fly in on a set path, and there's really no artificial intelligence there. It's not changing it up its decision when it comes into being, right?
Right.
But I mean, it still needs to be controlled and shown to kind of fly around on its path. You're just limiting what it will do in on screen, right? You know,
Right.
um, if uh, if the enemy flies on screen and it flies around on its own accord, you know, changing whether or not it wants to move to the left or to the right or, fire its guns, fire its missiles or something like that, then obviously that AI controller will be doing more there, you know, which obviously we'll need to kind of program in, like, when will it fire, when should it turn left, when should it turn right, would always follow the player, who knows, right? Well,
Right.
you know, that's obviously dependent on the style game that we make, but yeah, there you go. So, displaying information to players. HUD. A HUD is a heads-up display. You don't say. That's not the acronym whatsoever for heads-up display being a HUD. Or the 2D on-screen display that is common in many games. Think health, ammo, gun reticle, etc. Each player controller typically has one of these. Well, I would hope that the player controller has some form of HUD to them. It would be very interesting game to not have any kind of heads-up display for the player. Like,
A walking simulator wouldn't have it.
what's that?
A walking simulator wouldn't have it.
What do you mean a walking simulator?
Like all you do is just walk around in an environment, getting like environmental story or random narration. Would you really need a HUD of any kind?
Well, I mean, you're still needing to display the information to you anyway, so yes. You're still needing to see the environment, so that's still technically a heads-up display no matter what. You know, now, you might not have health, ammo, gun reticle, or anything like that to that, but you're still needing to see the environment, and that's still a display. That's still heads-up display. Um, if you're just kind of walking through the environment, yeah, the heads-up display wouldn't be vast. It wouldn't have a lot of information to it or anything along those lines. But it's still technically a heads-up display. You're still seeing the environment around you, kind of thing. So, um, if you had no heads-up display, you'd be seeing like basically a black screen. You wouldn't be
But
seeing it.
the screen isn't what you're seeing. That's the camera. What this isn't telling that the HUD is additional information on the screen, not what you're seeing. Like like you said, like the health, ammo, reticle, like you wouldn't have any of that. You will just be seeing, say you're walking a forest, that's all you'll see the forest. That's not the HUD. That's the camera view.
Yeah, yes and no. Um, I mean, yes, in that, yes, the camera does display the information that is supposed to be in front of you. Um, but I mean, um, the okay, the information that is being presented to you on screen is still technically the HUD, you know. Um, yes, there is a camera, but how it's actually being displayed to you can be
Isn't
cha-
considered
can
a
be
HUD in game design.
it can be changed. So, um, you know, you might have borders around around the screen. It might not show anything. Um, like I said, might not have health, it might not have ammo, it might not have gun reticle, but it still might have like a border with the name across it or something along those lines, right? So,
I play games that don't have anything. You just walk around and get environmental uh, storytelling by just looking at things. You're not getting any, maybe the occasional narration, but there's still no HUD, no
but
text, no nothing.
but that
That's not
narration,
the
but that
narration isn't a HUD. It is an sound cue.
but maybe you have closed captions on. That requires information being displayed to you on
Yeah,
the HUD.
subtitles would be a HUD.
So,
Subtitles would be a HUD, but not every game has that.
um, well, I mean, you're saying like, hey, if I go up to something, and something gets displayed to you, then that's again something that occurs in the HUD. So that's why I'm
Yeah, but
saying it's
so
like, okay,
a game does not every game has that. Even some walking simulators don't have that either.
okay, well, I haven't played a walking simulator that has nothing being shown to you whatsoever, but um, still, um, you know, I will grant you, like if you just have just a camera and that's it, then okay. Um, but I don't know what else you're going to be doing in said game other than, like you said, walking, which, um, what's the purpose of the, what is the game then at that particular moment in time, you know? Um,
That's where the environmental storytelling comes in. Like you add things to the environment, but by looking at it, you kind of get an idea what's happened.
but I mean, are you interacting with said environment? If so,
You
that
don't
interact.
necessarily have to.
but
You can just walk up to
no,
it and trigger a sound cue where your character comments on it.
okay. So what's um. Well, I mean, anything that has any kind of interaction or something along those lines would still require some form of HUD to it. You know, hmm, you know, anything that requires any form of um, character actions, might still, have that HUD for you. So I don't, we're kind of going around, um, you know, uh, I get what you're saying. I also, um, the, um, typically, I consider the HUD to be something, more than just, health, ammo, gun reticle, and stuff like that. It's one of those things that, um, you know, uh, anytime you see like an interact pop up or something along those lines, that's still, form of a, of a HUD or something along those lines. Okay, so I mean, if you're just like walking down a path and that's it, then okay,
I
yeah,
think I think of an example. I don't remember the name of a game that I did that didn't have a HUD. Was a horror game. Everything came from the ambient sound, the everything you were seeing that may be spooky, maybe occasional sounds off in the background that would scare you, but there was no HUD. You were just running around looking for something, and as you would find just approach things, something would happen, but you never interacted with anything. Things would happen on their own. There was no HUD there, and it was a horror game that was pretty spooky. No,
hmm,
there wasn't even dialogue. Everything was environmental.
hmm,
They would give you the feeling that something's hunting you, but there's nothing there up until the end.
okay, yeah, okay. Well, I mean, you know, I'll back down on it. You know, because it's not often that I see a game without some form of interaction in it, um, required. But I'll, I'll back off on that. Um, but in this particular case, camera, the player and player camera manager is the eyeball for the player and manages how it behaves. Each player controller typically has one of these as well. For more, see the camera workflow page. I mean, well, okay. Um, so each player character typically has one of these as well. Well, here's the thing: you don't necessarily need a camera on the player controller. Say, for example, you're playing like a top-down uh, um, you're playing like a top-down airplane shooter or something like that. I'm forgetting like the game types. Like maybe I think I think like one old game like 1942 or so. I think. the name was called, or
It's a shoot 'em
basically
up.
basically a shoot 'em up kind of a thing where you're like controlling an airplane, you're flying it around the screen, but it's always the the camera is kind of moving along the vertical landscape, right? From start to finish, and um and that's it. The camera is only displaying the world itself. So it's not necessarily being focused purely on the player, but more on the environment. So the camera wouldn't necessarily be centered directly on the player controller, but more of a panning camera along the world that the player will just have to kind of fly around into. So, hey there, Bloody Fang, how you doing there, bud? Welcome to the stream. So, so yeah. Um, we're kind of sorry about the discussion about the HUD and camera going overly long, but we might want to pause it here. Do you want me to finish off the
Yeah.
rest?
Uh, let's finish it off real quick.
Okay. Setting and tracking the rules of the game. The concept of the game is split into two classes, the game mode and the game state. It is the definition of the game, including things like the game rules and win conditions. Wait, hold on. Concept of a game is split into two classes, the game mode and the game state. Is the definition of the game, including things like game rules and win conditions. Okay, which one? There are two different classes. Then what manages what here? It only exists on the server. It typically should not have much data that changes during play, and definitely should not have transient data that clients need to know about. Okay. Um, okay. So this is a little weird that they're like on. They should the this like first sentence here, or even like the second sentence here, should probably be its own sentence above it because I mean they're talking about game mode and they're putting game state within the game mode. And it's like what? Don't do that. Okay, whatever. Moving on. The game state contains the state of the game, which could include things like list of connected players, the score, where the pieces are in a chess game, or the list of what missions you've completed in an open world game. The game state exists on the server and all clients and can replicate freely to keep all machines up to date. That's a weirdly stated sentence. The game state exists on the server and all clients and can replicate freely to keep all machines up to whatever. This that's weird. Okay. Um. Yeah. Okay. Well, we move on.
Yeah.
Player state is a state of a participant in the game, such as a human player or a bot that is simulating a player. Once again, they're going and they're saying a bot that's simulating a player. Then don't call it a player state then. uh, oh well. A non-player AI that exists as part of the game would not have a player state. Eh, Wait, what? Huh? They're confusing the hell out of me here. Okay, so a player state is a state of a participant in a game, such as a human player or a bot that is simulating a player. But they're saying a non-player AI that exists as part of the game would not have a player state. But you're saying that a bot is simulating a player is a player state. What do you mean? It's like
I'm guessing like in as an example, if that I can think of, if you had multiple characters you can control in at once, they would all of them would need a as player state, but an enemy would not have a player state. They would have a different kind of state.
I don't know. Alright, moving on. These two sentences sound like they're a contradiction to each other. That I'm highlighting right at this moment in time. That whole by the simulated player, non-player AI exists if part of the game would not have a player state. It feels like you're making a contradiction there to me, but whatever. Uh, Example data that would be appropriate in a player state, including player name, score, in-match level for something like a MOBA, or whether the player is currently carrying the flag in a CTF game. Player states for all players exist on all machines, unlike player controllers, and can replicate freely to keep things in sync. Okay. Not quite sure exactly what they mean there. Um, hmm. Okay. Um, Unless you can, are you understanding that last sentence?
A player state, I feel like it's only for uh pawns that you control, and only those, only the ones that the player can control. If the player doesn't control it, then the head doesn't have a player state.
That's a problem though, because this one is kind of talking about as though you're talking about like a multiplayer, like Apex or something like that. So that's what I'm kind of getting from this. Player states for all players exist on all machines. So it's though from what it sounds like, um, player controllers are something that will be on your machine that you are controlling your particular, you know, character. Using your input to control where the player goes. But if you're, say, like on a game that's on a server based, then everybody is being shown as a player state, showing where everybody is kind of being represented as to where they are in the map, and that information is being sent back to your machine, computer, what have you, um, saying this player state is over there, this player state is over there, or at least that's what I'm thinking they're trying to go with here. But I'm not 100% sure if that's correct.
Hmm.
Because I'm not quite sure what they mean by player states for all players exist on all machines. It's the only thing that I can. This is the closest thing that I can think of. It's like you're in a first-person shooter like Counter Strike, and you hop on in. If you don't know where all the other players are, then you don't have a game, right? In
Yeah.
terms of Counter Strike, right?
Yeah.
So so I'm assuming that all the human characters that you see are basically being sent back to you saying, hey, these are player states coming back to you, but obviously you're not in control of a player state per se, you are using a player controller, so but yet a player controller would be controlling a player state. I don't know. This feels a little odd, but um, okay. Framework class relationships. This flowchart illustrates how these core game classes relate to each other. A game is made up of a game mode and game state, right? Human players joining the game are associated with player controllers. Okay. These player controllers allow players to possess pawns in the game so that they can have physical representations in the level. Sure. Which the AI controllers can also have other additional pawns, according to this. Um, Player controllers also give players input controls, a heads-up display or HUD, and a player camera manager to handle camera views, which, again, you might not necessarily have. Well, I mean, the player controller has a player camera manager if you want to add that into the player controller, right? So, if you want to have um, the camera, specific to that player, then yes, you'll want to have a player camera manager, but you might not necessarily need that depending on the game, right?
Right.
So, um, hmm. Uh, so, eh, hmm. It feels as though there is a little bit, there's kind of like lines here that are kind of missing. Like, the pawn would be showing the camera manager, so it should have its, the pawn would have, if you're saying that the camera is associated with the player, then the pawn itself would have the camera, would it not? So therefore, wouldn't it be like having a line from the pawn to the player camera manager?
Mm, I guess that would cause trouble if the AI was controlling it. After all, only the player can control it, and that would need to be tied to the player controller for just to avoid the AI from taking control of the camera manager.
Hmm. I mean, that's true.
Because remember, the AI can control the pawn, and if the pawn is tied to the camera, then the AI can control the camera.
Well, okay. Well, here's the thing. Obviously the player controller will possess, one particular pawn, okay? If you have a player controller and the AI controller trying to fight over the same pawn, then yes, you would be correct, okay? Um, but here's the thing. Each pawn would have their, if you're talking about like a first person shooter, every pawn would have their own camera. Even the AI controller would have, kind of need a camera to see where the player is located at, right? Otherwise, how would they be able to, see the player and shoot at the player, right?
I think that falls more not on the camera but on NPC vision, which it's actually something different from the camera.
Well, I mean, it's still, a camera-based system though.
Okay, well,
So,
there's only one camera that the player controls and sees at all times. And if there is a pawn that can be controlled by AI, you don't want to give that camera the camera you're controlling
no, no, no.
to
Okay,
let the AI control. That's why the camera manager is on the player controller, not on the pawn.
well, okay. My point is that every pawn would have their own camera associated with it. Okay, no matter what. Okay. Um, the AI controller would control a pawn that would have its own camera that will see, whatever whatever um, the programmer will say like, hey, the camera view for the for this, for the AI controller will only be able to see so much. Okay, we'll limit the camera view for the AI. Okay, that's something that you can kind of manipulate. Okay, basically saying, hey, the camera is really bad for the AI controller. They're only going to be able to see so much within their camera, and that's it. Okay. Um, and I'm separating that out, by the way, from the pawn that the player is controlling that will have its own camera. And the camera for that pawn will be, giving giving its, um, its information, the environmental player states and so on and so forth to the player camera manager in that particular case. So that's why I'm saying, there's, um, I would imagine that there should be like, potentially some additional lines here that they're not necessarily showing in this. Plus, the input, that is being contained within the player controller should have direct control over the pawn that the player controller has. So the input, should have like a line to the pawn saying, the input that you are doing could potentially control what the pawn does. So, so that's all. I'm saying that, there could be some additional lines here that they're not necessarily showing. So, but at the same time, the possess that they're talking about there, they might be saying, hey, possess might have all that kind of built into it. It's just, um,
It will have its own separate set of things related to AI, not to the player.
well, I mean, the player controller will have certain, functions that will allow for the player to handle, what it sees, what it gets, what it does, and so on and so forth. Obviously, the AI controller would have its own. It will, you know, um, the will have similar controller functions to the player controller, but obviously you're gonna have to, we're gonna have to kind of manage,
We will have to,
what it can do.
yeah,
So,
we will have to figure out a way to make the AI to be bound to that pawn's limit.
right. Well, sort of. You don't necessarily need to. You know, for example, if you're playing like a first-person shooter, you could basically say that the AI controller's pawn has no loss of sight whatsoever. It can spot you from anywhere on the map and will go directly towards you no matter what. AKA, for example, World of Warships. Um, you know, I played that, against the AI component. I
Yeah,
played it
they will
against
always
AI.
be lineage to the base.
Hmm.
They will always be lineage to the base.
Or if they're trying to track you down, or if they're trying to hunt for you, they will go after you no matter what, even if you're quote unquote hidden. Believe me, I was,
Yeah.
yeah, I was in a destroyer. I was not being spotted whatsoever. And as I was kind of moving around the ocean, trying to like, find some way of like getting into like a good position to attack the AI opponents, they kept on matching my my movement. They kept on adjusting themselves to kind of follow me, even though I was hidden. I'm like, hmm, that, there, and the AI isn't using past data. It's not going to, to where I was, anymore. It's changing its movement to match mine. And that basically meant that the AI had, um, map data that they shouldn't necessarily have had.
Yeah, that's just straight up a design flaw there, pretty much.
Or it
And I
was
doubt they'll ever bother to fix it.
or they just basically said, "Hey, we're gonna give the AI the ability to see around the map, no matter what." You could literally say, "Hey, we're gonna give the AI advantages," and that's an advantage. So, you know,
Yeah, that's why I would consider it a design flaw.
mm,
Yeah, you want your players to think strategically and like think about like maybe flanking or using hitting cover to reposition yourself. But if the AI always knows where you are, then that's a design flaw because it's not supposed to know where you are at all time because it defeats the purpose of even strategizing.
I mean, you know, on one hand, yes, I would, as a player, I would definitely say, yes, you're right. It is a design flaw. As a game designer who wants to make sure that the AI is somewhat difficult to fight against, then I'd probably design that in to do that. So it would kind of create more a need for more of a player-based, a team-based strategy versus a one-on-one strategy. If it was a one versus one, then yeah, that would be something where it's like, yeah, I'm giving too much, giving too much advantage to the AI, right? But seeing that it's a more of a team-based game, then them tracking me, if I would basically need to relate to my team like, hey, I'm going, they're following along with me. I'm gonna put them into a position where you guys can easily broadside them. Okay, so there's a little bit more to a team-based battle than say like one versus one, right? So in some ways, you're right. That would be a design flaw, and um, but at the same time, in terms of AI design, sometimes you might want to create such a flaw to give the AI more of a chance against a human player, right? If you create a very basic AI that will just kind of go straight for the base and that's it, then they're gonna lose no matter what. Okay, there's no question about that. So you have to kind of give them certain advantages to to try to compete. Otherwise, you'd have to create an AI that is super smart, learns from itself, and will make its own decisions, and you would have to create something that is of the same kind of um, intelligence as say like the AI that you know wins in chess, right? um, but at the same time that chess AI that beat the world champion and stuff like that, it was analyzing millions of moves ahead. Every single time the chess master would make a move, it would analyze like millions of possibilities itself to try to figure out the best move to make afterwards. So, um, you know, some would say that that's not necessarily complete AI per se. I don't know. That gets into more of a AI theory discussion debate.
It's more of a learning machine than anything else.
Yeah. If you want a learning machine, obviously, then you wouldn't want to give them map data, right? Okay, because they're not learning if you give them the entire map data. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But if they're not a learning machine, if they're not any, if they have very basic rudimentary AI, they're not learning, then if you want to make it difficult for the players or, give the players some form of challenge, then you might want to consider giving them map data. So it all depends on what you want to do with your AI. And that's why I'm saying, you know, for you and I, sure, if you want to make it realistic, then yes, it would be a design flaw. But if
In a
you're,
game rule, I can think they could have done for that is limit its absolute view to the current ship's view range, but in, give it like general direction of which way you are, but not straight up tell it where exactly you are. That's sort of what they did with Alien Isolation.
mm,
The alien would get like a general direction of where you are, but never exactly.
right,
It would go to that general direction to look for you, but
mm,
it wouldn't know where you are at all times.
right,
Like that's something that could have been done. Like, so okay, it is like the ship's southwest of your position. Okay,
mm,
start sailing southwest,
right,
but it's not aiming at you. It won't aim at you until it detects you.
right. But
That would have been a fix.
right. And believe me, I would definitely suggest that, if world warships really cared about that, it'd be
Yeah, they
some,
don't care about their own AI.
yeah. Then
Otherwise, they would have fixed this aiming a long time ago.
and that too. um, but they don't necessarily give a damn about that. They care more about the PvP style of, and than anything else. They don't really give a damn about, how smart their are. So, um, so they're just basically using a very basic, AI structure to it, and they're giving it certain advantages that, yeah, you and I would be saying, this is a design flaw, but, right now, based off of what we've seen, they don't really care about their AI. So, they've designed it that way so, they could make a slight challenge to the players, but that's it. If they really cared about their AI, they would be doing more of a learning AI and have it study the players, how the players like interact, how the AI interacts, how the player, AI would like go, okay, what do, what is the, what does the player normally, you know, do in these kind of situations or something along those lines. Then, then it'd be like, more of a learning, and then it'd be like, okay, where should I go in this particular case? Then there might be something more to it, but yeah. Um, so design flaw, if it was a learning, yes. Um, if it's not a learning, then it's by their design. They designed it that way, so it wouldn't technically be a design flaw. So that's the distinction I want to make on that one. Okay. And with that, I think, unless you have anything to counter on that.
No, right now I better go get something to eat. Otherwise, I won't have a lot of time to eat.
I know, I know. I'm sorry about that.
No, don't worry.
But, hey, we got some pretty good discussions, I would imagine. So, hopefully everybody enjoyed that. So, but that's going to be it for the gameplay framework quick reference for now. Unless there's something else that you wanted to add there, Blackheart, let's go ahead and close on down.
Mm, yeah, let's close on that.
Okay. And tomorrow will be the game flow overview. So everybody look forward to that when if you're watching this like right now live, or if you are watching this later on our YouTube videos, please feel free to comment, subscribe, like, share it around, all that kind of jazz for the YouTube algorithm. That would help both of us out. Please comment for any kind of, if you have any kind of discussions, constructive criticism, um, if you want to answer any of our past questions, we look forward to it. Um, Anything else?
Not that I
Mm,
can think of.
Description. Go to our description for links. And yeah, I think that's it. So
Yep.
let's get out of here.
And
I'll let you
yeah,
go to
and our
yours,
document.
and
Yep.
I'll end my video. So I'll see you later, bud. Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop the video right now.